Hello, guys. Welcome to today's market snapshot session. Covering in for Rufus. My name is Samson Mzera, and I will be reviewing what has happened so far and picking up from what we discussed on Friday with regards to the BOJ and what's happening in with the pound, also in the UK, and also looking at the Australian dollar. Yeah, so if you can hear me, just say hi in the chat section. I think I'll be able to confirm while you go on. Okay, so we had a bit of a shocker on Tuesday. So let's just start with the charts, with the calendar, and then move on to the charts. So this is how the calendar has been. From Monday, there's basically not much happening. On Tuesday was the anticipated monetary policy statement. Now, remember, we had discussed last week that if we if the rumors were true, then the Japanese yen will continue strengthening, but that wasn't the case. If you checked out the monetary policy statement, there was a bit of a shocker. Yen slides, here it says yen slides after BOJ stands pat on ultra loose policy. So remember, we said the yen has been weakening for the longest. If you look at this chart here of USD JPY, if you look at this chart on the daily, actually the weekly, you can see that from 2021 and even 2022, we've just been going in a very sharp uptrend. This is unusual for any currency. Usually, the currencies counterbalance each other in most cases, but we just had this sharp move. And the reason was because we had ultra loose monetary policy in Japan. That is, the BOJ was doing a lot of asset purchases and trying to control the yield. Yeah. And that's why we had this move. So the thinking was last week when the rumors came out that they're stopping the whole policy, the loose policy thing and thinking of tightening, then we sort of started anticipating a stronger yen. And that's why we had this sharp fall, this one over here, and this one over here. Yeah. Actually, this is a confirmation for last week over here. Yeah. So we indeed expected that the yen was going to continue dropping. But when the meeting came out and the rumors were cleared, it seems as though they're not leaving there, or that's what they confirmed. The yen, so let me see if I can. Oh, yeah. So that's what they confirmed. BOJ just was adamant on sticking to that policy, which was loose policy for maintaining the yield. Because as you know, Japan has a very huge debt to GDP ratio. So maintaining the yield is crucial to control payments and things like that. So usually it has a very negative impact on the currency. So you either control the debt and weaken your currency, or you strengthen your currency and let the debt become more expensive. So the Bank of Japan, yeah, it's saying the Bank of Japan maintained its ultra loose monetary policy as expected, as it opted to wait for more evidence on whether wages and prices would rise enough for it to justify massive a shift away from the massive monetary stimulus. Yeah. So that's the thing that traders were anticipating or waiting for, just a confirmation, and the rumors were proven to be wrong. And that's why you can see that on Tuesday, we had this push upwards. So there was an upwards move, sort of a correction to what had happened here. So there was this move here, down here, and then the market corrected itself. And we might either go into a consolidation type of market or a sideways range, or we might go back up to our highs here. So it's just a matter of waiting for time and seeing whether we're going to continue seeing this uptrend materializing. At the moment, it seems very tricky to attempt to continue selling down, to selling lower. So good to be very, very careful with this one in terms of looking for sales. However, I still think the long-term perspective and the long-term trend for this one is because eventually they have to stop doing what they're doing. So I do think that the long-term trend is going to be, you're going to have a correction of this entire move we saw in 2021 and 2022 over here. So that's the long-term trend, but how we get there going to be a bit more complicated than just a straightforward downtrend as we initially anticipated. But it's good to keep an eye on the Bank of Japan uh, just to see the developments there. So that's going to give you, if indeed they continue or if indeed they change their mind, it's going to give you a very good swing trade lower for months or even weeks that you can hold out for. Yeah, so that's with that. Let's go to the next item that we had this week. Let's see. So I hope you've taken note of that in terms of the Japanese yen. We had the Canadian CPI, which came in positive, but my concern was on the CPI. So CPI for the UK came in at 3.9%, and the expected was 4.3%. Now, remember, there was a time last week we discussed about this, actually on Friday. We say that, let's actually go back to last week. So where was it? Yeah, here. This was yeah. So on the monetary policy statement for last week, they said they are more hawkish than expected. They are looking to even possibly raise or maintain for longer, and they are not even thinking of cuts. And that is what made GBP USD continue going higher. So if you look at that, this is the hourly chart. You can see that this was that statement they made last week. We had this push all the way up. And on Friday, on Monday, we had a good opportunity to get into this supply demand area over here and take another buying opportunity. However, when the CPI reading came, so I hope this chart is clear first before we continue. Let me just highlight this section over here. This is when they had the MPC Monetary Policy Committee meeting. We had pound going higher, yeah. And then on Friday, we had an opportunity to have a pullback. So we had a pullback. This is Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday. Yeah. So on Friday and Monday, we had a pullback, and then another good opportunity for a re-entry based on that sentiment. The fact that they are going to continue with a tight monetary policy, meaning a stronger pound, stronger GBP. However, when the inflation news came in, and this was yesterday, so if you look at, now let's go back to this week. If you look at this week, this is Wednesday, when the CPI came in at 10 a.m., 3.9%. First off, this is a very sharp drop. This is a very huge difference between what is expected and what was the actual. It's very rare, apart from here in July, to see a big difference between the forecast and actual. So in that case, it cast doubt into what they said last week. Remember last week they're saying we're not considering tightening and loosening policy until inflation is under control. This sharp drop in inflation means or implies that inflation might just be getting back to normal. Yeah. So having said that, what happened is now it put doubt into whatever they said last week, which was that bullishness for the pound, and that's why we had this drop here yesterday. So we had this drop back into this supply region over here. I'll delete this one like that. And now a bullish case, unless we see stronger US data, a bullish case for pound, need to be very careful with how you play this one out. So in terms of technicals, you can see that in terms of technicals, you can see that we have a sort of a zone, a support zone. Let me just adjust this one. We have sort of a support zone over here, and if things are not looking, if things keep on looking the way they are at the moment. That is, if we don't see strong US data, it's going to be very hard to justify a bullish case for GBP USD at the moment. However, the long-term trend, again, long-term trend, we have not broken any sort of major structure. We are still in an uptrend. Yeah. So for me, I'd still be bullish until the market goes beyond this level over here. So I'll still be bullish on pound until the market goes beyond this point. If it breaks lower, then now it's time to reassess the whole bullish pound situation for that. So that's number two. So how to play this? You can either wait for today's and tomorrow's news to see how to go about playing this. I know there's GDP numbers, or you can wait for it to fill this imbalance over here before looking for opportunities, or you can wait for, but it's going to be a very hard case to justify the pound going higher, without some positive news from the US to at least make that momentum higher. So it's going to be very hard to justify a buy at the moment. However, it's still in the books. So that's one thing to look at. So if I see it breaking lower, then probably you'll be feeling this imbalance, and then I'll try to consider fundamentals when you're down here. If we can have a bullish case back up. Remember, again, for the year, still looks very bullish. Long term, that is, because the CPI is just one data point. The reading was just one data point. Okay. That's with that. So we've looked at the yen, we've discussed the yen, we've discussed the pound, and now we are going to look at what's next for this week. Unemployment claims come in every week, so I'm not very keen on that one per se. But if you look at the trend in unemployment claims, you can see they've been fairly low and okay. So it's not something that should be concerning at the moment. So that's going to at least have a bit of a boost in the dollar today if it comes in low or in line with expectations, because the expectation is it's going to be lower than last week. So at least that one we might, but this one comes in almost every week, so it doesn't have that big of an impact. The other news point we are anticipating is the GDP at 5.2%. This one, I mean, 5.2, 5.1. This is a very high reading because it's at 5.2 and the previous was 2.1. So we're expecting some major growth. This is quarter and quarter GDP numbers. Let's see how they come in, but it's just going to prove either the economy is resilient or it's not resilient. So we're going to have to. They're not very important news releases. Yes, they're important, but they're not very. They don't affect the market that much. So in terms of GDP, for example, unless it's a very dramatic reading from the forecast, you shouldn't expect it to have that huge of an impact on the markets. Yeah. Okay. So whether we're going to continue seeing a bullish trend depends on how the rest of these announcements come in. So if everything here is positive for the dollar and core PCE, which is also a key measurement, is positive, then we might expect at least a bit of a comeback and these two trends over here. So let's go back to this chart. So these setups over here, again, long term, we're still bullish. I'm going to skip USD JPY, but long term, we're still bullish. GBP USD, for example, a positive reading obviously is going to at least have some reprieve. We might fill in this imbalance over here. So let me just delete these arrows. There and there. So for those who are joining us, we've started from last week, our discussion last week, and what has happened this week and what to expect. So if you have any positive reading, then I'll be looking for this imbalance here to be filled. Yeah. That is, if you have any positive reading from GDP, unemployment, and core PCE together. Yeah. Then probably, oh, sorry, it's the other way around. If we have positive news, this is the imbalance, not this one. Just a minute. Apologies about that. This is the imbalance we're talking about here. if you have any positive readings from the US, that is with GDP, unemployment, and core PCE, then you're going to have a very justifiable case to go lower. Why? Because it proves, for instance, for the market sentiment, that we still have room to go lower for the pound. Yeah, if the US economy is resilient, it might provide some room for a bit of tight policy, but I don't think it's going to do much for it at the moment. With the pound now turn trajectory to be bearish, not for long. So again, the only point I'll see the pound as bearish is if we cross this level over here. Remember, on the daily, that level is, let me just zoom in. On the daily, that's a key low, a key lower low. So the only time I'll be bearish is if we break lower on the daily on this level over here, that on the H4 looks like this. But until then, this is still either looking slightly bullish, or we'll have a sideways trend as the market decides what to do next. Because it's obvious for the Fed, they're thinking of easing. So it just needs a bit of data to support that. For example, if we have negative news for the dollar, is going to make a more obvious case for the direction of the market. So if these readings, so let's start with what will be an obvious play and what will not be an obvious play. An obvious play will be, okay, we know long term the dollar is supposed to be weakening. If we find news like core PCE, unemployment, and GDP that is in line with that long term view, then that might make it a bit obvious the direction of the dollar index. Yeah, that means it might be a bit more obvious that we will see the dollar continuing to weaken. The more confusing case is if we have positive news. If we have positive news, for example, for unemployment and for GDP, then it's going to be a mixed bag of reactions from the market. That's when you're going to start being a bit careful with how we assess those reactions. We might probably even see whipsaws. Yeah. So the obvious scenario is if we have negative news for the dollar. The less obvious scenario is when the US economy still appears to be resilient. And that is if we have positive news for core PCE and for unemployment and the GDP of the US. So today is very brief. We've discussed three things. One more thing I've forgotten is this. Monetary policy minutes, Australian dollar, RBA. So for RBA, it's a very straightforward play. The others might be a bit confusing because of the mixed news announcements we've had, but this one is a bit more straightforward. Australia Central Bank considering raising rates 2 weeks ago before deciding a hold was stronger. So in this case, this is going to be AUD USD over here. Yeah. So for AUD USD, it's an obvious play. We had a very nice breakout over here. We had a retest of this level over here. And now the only thing that we will be waiting for is fundamental support for this continuation. That is, if we see weaker news for dollar, then it's very straightforward that this trend is going to hold upwards. That's not the case with GBP and euro, because for there we've seen pound having weak data coming out, and for euro not quite, but we'll still be monitoring it. So the euro hasn't dropped as much as the pound has, and that's now why you're trying to deduce what to do. Yeah. So if you compare this chart on the hourly and this chart here for euro on the hourly, you can see that from the pullback we had, again, this was on Friday, nice buying opportunity around Monday there. We didn't drop back to this supply level or demand level here for the euro. But if you look at the pound, came back, went up, then came back down because of inflation. Yeah. So our anticipation is for today and tomorrow, the news needs to be consistent. That means we need to see string of negative news for both GDP, the GDP reading for the US, final GDP for the quarter, and unemployment claims. It's neither here nor there, and core PCE. These are also very important. So if you see these two in line with the thesis of a weaker dollar, then the continuation is going to be obvious for Australia, AUD, USD. Hope that's clear. Yeah, so it's going to be having a very brief conversation here, just a follow-up from last week. Remember last week we said we're expecting we're expecting uptrends in both Euro and GU, but since pound had weaker CPI, it's kind of detracting from that uptrend. But on the daily, we are still on an uptrend. So let me just remove this arrows. So on the daily, we are still on an uptrend. Unless we break this region over here, then we should expect this region over here. Then that's a change of character on the daily. Then now maybe we can start reassessing the whole fundamental play behind GBP USD. Bearish 4 hours. Yeah, so it's looking quite bearish, but again, we've said it's very data dependent at the moment because now we're having a mixed bag of news events coming in. And when news events are countering each other, we usually have a ranging market instead of a directional market, either up or down. So we've said that if we go lower than this level over here, that's when we'll think about reassessing the situation. But if news for tomorrow and today comes in support of the dollar, then we might save ourselves from going and filling this imbalance over here. So let's wait and see what happens at 3 to know. Sorry about that, guys. I think we had a connection issue with the network. Now I think we're back. So yeah, so I was just winding up on the discussion. Let me just share my screen. Yeah, so I was winding up on the discussion. We said because we had negative CPI yesterday, I hope you can. It's audible now. If you can hear me, just say hi on this chat section. If you can hear me, just say hi. It's clear. Can you see my screen? It's not being shared. Okay. So let me just recap one more time. Last week, we were talking about a bullish case for pound, and specifically pound. You're not discussing euro at the moment, for pound, yeah? And we said that it became bearish, or it became a mixed bag. Oh, sorry, it was bullish last week because they came out and said we're not looking to cut anytime soon. And that's why we had this push over here. However, the CPI has come in and it's now confusing things. Yeah, it's not very clear if we need to go up or down. So going forward, it's going to be very data dependent on how we go about this. That is, if we continue seeing news from the US with regards to possibility of what is it, a stronger dollar. That is, if we continue seeing positive news from the US, then there is a high likelihood that we will feel this imbalance back to this demand zone over here. Yeah, and that's what we've been discussing. At least I think you can rewind. The other thing that surprised us this week was the Bank of Japan, when we were saying that this is a mega downtrend, and we've explained this at the start of the video. They came in on Tuesday and said they're still going to hold tight onto their policy. So that caused a reversal in the expectation. So this move up here was caused by them saying we're still going to have tight monetary, loose monetary policy, and that's why the Japanese yen sort of weakened. So we're not looking for a bearish case until maybe data from Japan becomes clear that it needs to continue being USD JPY bearish. Yeah. So we've summarized this. We've said the most obvious currency to trade right now, because the fundamentals are looking a bit more straightforward, is AUD USD, and it also serves as a long-term uptrend for 2024. So we made a nice breakout retest. If news from the US comes in negative, this is the best currency to trade, because at the moment GBP is looking like it's a mixed bag of news events. So the best one to look for a weak dollar today will probably be AUD USD, especially with how it's been reacting nicely to technicals also. Yeah, so that's the what we'll be looking at for positive news. For negative news, then this is what we will be trying to anticipate. If the news comes in that the dollar looks like it's a bit strong, let me just clarify. If news comes in and the dollar is looking weak, if negative news comes in, or if news against the dollar comes in, that's the core PCE and the GDP, then these technicals will hold and we'll continue seeing an uptrend because it's a weaker dollar. But if anything suggests signs of a stronger dollar, remember CPI yesterday was very bad for pound, then this might be a good candidate to see if it will fill that imbalance. I think that sums up today's market snapshot. The two currencies we'll be looking at. Again, these ones obviously now will be in a sideways or trying to find the pathing, because again, it's very tough when we're having a mixed bag of news to work with at the moment. So for US 500 and anything dollar related, at the moment, it's best to play the more obvious currencies, the ones that already have one-sided fundamentals. And by one-sided fundamentals, we know that Australian dollar has positive fundamentals, pound has negative fundamentals. Yeah, so if the dollar comes in weak, then we go with Australian dollar. If the dollar comes in strong, then we go with pound based on the news today. Okay, having said that, enjoy the rest of your day. Looking forward to discussing what happens on Friday, tomorrow at 11 a.m. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of the session and happy peep hunting. Again, also apologies for the technical, the network issues I've experienced earlier. Other than that, see you on tomorrow's market snapshot session.